gute Woche. Rebbe in today's Farbrengen began right away at the beginning that this Shabbos, the specialty of this Shabbos is that it is a Shabbos of Chazak. Because today we have completed Parshas Bechukosai, and by completing Parshas Bechukosai we are finishing Chumash Vayikra. And as we say at the very end of Parshas Bechukosai, Eila HaMitzvos, it's something which relates to general to all of mitzvahs, Asher Tziva Hashem es Moshe b'nei Yisrael Bahar Sinai, and then we proclaim Chazak, Chazak v'nischazek, which means let us all strengthen ourselves. Chazak is from the word Chazaka, Chazek in Hebrew, which means strength. And this is something which we proclaim each time we finish a Chumash. Of special significance is it when we are finishing Chumash Vayikra. Chumash Vayikra is the third of Chumashim. And we know that Bechlal in Torah, number 3 is of extreme significance. As we find Taka when the Rebbe gave Yidden the Torah. When the Rebbe gave us the Torah, Chazal explained that Torah was given in the 3rd month, Sivan, which is the 3rd from Nisan. Torah was given, it contains divided into 3 compartments, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, and was given to a nation which is composed of 3. An Amtli Soy, the nation is composed of 3, Koyanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. So we see that the number of 3 is something which is extremely significant. So especially when we are making a siyum, when we are completing the Sefer of Torah, which is the 3rd of the Svarim in Torah, it is of special significance. Even the words as themselves which we proclaim, Chazak, Chazak, v'nischazek, is also 3 words. We are underlining 3 times the concept of strengthening ourselves. And in fact, this relates to the entire concept of Chazaka. There's a concept in halacha of chazaka. Chazaka in halacha means an established fact, an established ownership over something is called a chazaka, or an established custom. I'm not getting into details. It could be related in various fields. And there also, when is it considered an established fact? Once it was practiced so for 3 times. So again we have that the concept of chazaka, which is chazak, v'nis chazek, which we all proclaim today in Shul when we finished the Parshas Bechukosai, when we finished Sefer Vayikra, it's all corresponding to the number of 3. And it's extremely significant because this is the 3rd Sefer which we are finishing today. And here right away the Rebbe also referred to the seal of Dvarim, which we say at the end of Dvarim, and in Dvarim there we underline, end of Torah in fact, there we underline the fact of the great and outstanding miracles which the Rebbe has done to Yidden. All the Oisei Sumayfsim, all the great miracles which the Rebbe has performed to us. And there we conclude, Asher Osa Moshe La'enei Kol Yisrael. How do we conclude Chumash about Yisrael, about Yidden? Why? There's a Medrash. Medrash says we have 2 things. We have Yidden and we have Torah. It says the Medrash, we do not know who came before, Yisrael or Torah. Medrash says, being that in Torah we find expressions, Daber al b'nei Yisrael, Tzaves b'nei Yisrael, it's a constant expression constantly in Torah, is a siman that Yisrael came before Torah. This is an indication that Yisrael is prior to Torah. And that is why Torah talks about Yisrael as an existing fact. So to underline this fact of the chshivas of Yisrael, how Yisrael were priority before everything, that is why Torah concludes with La'enei Kol Yisrael. In front of Kol Yisrael, getting back to our Indian, says the Rebbe, and it's extremely significant that every Indian in Torah, we have to take a lesson from it. And when we're talking about a Shabbos of Chazak, What is the lesson which we can derive from this? The lesson is very obvious, that this is a Shabbos that calls for all of us to strengthen ourselves, to add strength to our own self in the inyanim of Torah mitzvahs and in inyanim of Yiddishkeit. And this corresponds to the contents of the Sedra. What is the name of this week's Sedra? The name of the Sedra is Bechukosai. What is the inyan of Bechukosai? So simply we teach, as we will get into in a few minutes, the pasuk in Bechukosai teleichu ve'es mitzvosai tishmoru va'asisa moisem. So what does Chukosai mean? Rashi comments that we have to be heavily involved in the learning of Torah. Ve'es mitzvosai tishmoru means the fulfillment of mitzvahs. However, Chassidus brings out a much deeper taich. Chassidus brings out that Chukosai stems from the word chakiko, which means engraving. And there are two types of writing. There's a writing where one can write, where he writes with ink on paper. There's another way of writing. Another way of writing is when one engraves. What is the difference whether one engraves or it's written with ink on a piece of paper? The difference is very simple. Ink can fade. It can fade and it can be erased and can come a time when it will no longer be there. However, when we're talking about letters which are written in Isiyas Achkiko, which are engraved on whatever substance that will be engraved, it is there to stay. It will never be able to disappear. In fact, Chazal tell us that mem v'samach shebeluchos b'neis hayoimdim. Letter mem and letter samach, which were engraved in the luchos, were their standing in the luchos was on a miracle. Why? Because let us take a samach for an example. A samach is round, and when they engrave through and through on the luchos. So mamela, a round letter just will not hold it. It under regular circumstances it would just fall through. So that's what Chazal tell us. B'neis hayuaimdim, their standing in the luchos was a miracle. What does it mean to us in the Hira and the lesson which we derive from this? This stresses how a Yid has to become bound and tied to Torah to such an extent of chakika that it becomes part of him. Not like writing written ink on paper, where there are two separate things, but you have written letters on a piece of paper. And engraving it is not so. The letters that we have engraved on a stone or on a diamond or whatever the case may be, on any substance, becomes part of this substance which it was engraved on. The same when we're talking about our commitment to Torah, to Yiddishkeit, it has to be in a format of Bechukosai. And as the Rebbe used the expression, when somebody goes in the street, you can be able to identify Adus is a Bechukosai Yid. It's a Yid that's living up to this type of a standard, that Yiddishkeit within him is Bechukosai. And the Rebbe went a step further. We just mentioned earlier that the letter Mem and letter Samach b'neis hayoimdim. What's the inyan of Mem and Samach? The numeric value of a Mem and a Samach is 100 together. Mem is 40 and Samach is 60. So we get 100. And Bechlal is brought out in Chassidus that there are 10 koiches within 10 koiches anefesh. In every soul there are 10 koiches. And if we go into more details, each koyach in itself also consists of 10 detailed koyches. So what are we saying? 10 times 10 is 100. In other words, when we want to bring out how the entire person is fully affected by this inyan of Bechukosai, that's the inyan of Mem and Samach, that all the parts and parcels of the person, all the detailed koyches within his soul are all fully engraved. What's the pshat engraved? Just like when letters are engraved on something, it is totally united. The whole concept of Torah and Yiddishkeit is totally united with the person, as we just expressed ourselves, that it can be identified that this is a Bechukosai Yid. And here the Rebbe goes a step further. What does the pasuk say? Bechukosai teilechu. In Bechukosai teilechu, we have to go in the chukim. What's the pshat? When one goes, when one walks. In other words, we cannot satisfy ourselves to stand on one place. We have to keep on going, even when we're talking at such a level, at a level of Bechukosai, where a person is totally united with it and totally committed to the extent that it is part of him. And nonetheless, we are saying, Teilechu, he can never satisfy himself at whatever level he's standing, but there's constantly a need for him to keep on going higher, higher, and yet higher. That's the need of Teilechu. We have to keep on going. And here the Rebbe, on the intellectual part of this, raised some questions. What is the pshat we are saying, Bechukosai Teilechu? In other words, an understanding of it. Chukosai and Teilechu are two contradictory concepts. Why? He says as follows. When you write letters that are written in ink, says the Rebbe, there's a concept of ksav al gabe ksav, which means we have something written. I can go ahead and rewrite on top of that. However, when you have an engraving, the engraving takes up a certain amount of place. It's not shaykh to say that the engraved letters are growing. The engraved letters are expanding. If it's engraved, it is there at its full size. So how can we say teilechu, to go higher, to do it? What's the pshat when we go? When we go, we walk higher, and we expand the letters. We expand the engraving. Engraving, you can't expand. Engraving is there, it's fixed. Or the Rebbe brought it in from another way. There's the Chazal tell us that the entire Torah was given to Moshe from Sinai. And Chazal used the expression, Afilu mashe talmid vosik osed l'chadesh. Even what a bright student will introduce in later years in Torah, it will be mechadesh, he will add on something new in Torah. This was also given to Moshe Messina. So the Rebbe says, we have to understand that if we consider it that he is mechadesh, which means he's contributing a new inyan in Torah, something which was not in existence until now. How can we say that Moshe had it already Messina? If you will be saying he's revealing in Yonim, he's giving to understand in Yonim, but every word in Chazal is accurate. In fact, the Rebbe says there are various girsois, which means there are various
ways,
versions. Correct, thank you. There are various versions on this expression of Chazal, and the most accepted and the most popular version, says the Rebbe, is the one, Kol Masha Talmud Vosik Osed L'Chadesh, whatever the bright student is going to introduce. So if he's introducing a new understanding in Torah, by him introducing a new understanding in Torah, if it is new, how is it possible for Moshe Rabbeinu to get it Messina? And then the Rebbe went into lengthy explanations in these inyanim and tied it into also what we say, that when we hope that when Mashiach will come, there's the expression Torah Chadosha Me'iti Teitzei. At that time, a new Torah, in other words, means deeper inyanim and Torah will be revealed. So we have the expression that this type of a concept that is an inyan of a hischachus, renewal, new inyanim in Torah. And from this the Rebbe led into, when we're talking about the inyan of fulfilling mitzvahs Torah and Yiddishkeit in the format of Chakika, Rebbe compares this, but we find various levels of commitment to mitzvahs. There's a commitment to mitzvahs where a person is doing mitzvahs as the expression is in Chassidus, mitzvahs anoshim melumoda. Mitzvahs anoshim melumoda means it's a kind of a routine. He does it without feeling, but because he did it yesterday, and he did it the day before, and he did it 3 days ago, this is how he starts his day, this is what he does. But again, it's lacking of feeling, it's lacking of a Kabbalah's oil, it's lacking of an understanding of the mitzvah. But it's done also practice. Mitzvahs hanoshem elamoda. On the other hand, we find there's a concept of minafshei kokora. It's a Gemara, an Aramaic expression. The Gemara discusses about a Tana, which when it came to Moedim, which we say in davening, it came to Moedim minafshei kokora. Automatically, his body bowed. Being that when it comes to Moedim, we know we have to bow when we say Moedim anachnu loch. So this Tana uplifted his body to such an extent that when it came to Moedim minafshei kokora, when he said Moedim anachnu loch, his body already by itself bow down to the Rebishter. And here the Rebbe went again into details how as soon as when we rise in the morning, and it's written in Shulchan Aruch, as soon as a person is meir mishinose, he gets up from his sleep, first thing we are supposed to do, we are supposed to say Moida ani lefanecha, which is an expression of thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But this expression of thanks, which we say right away, though it's not into any detailed understanding or detailed explanations, all it is an in-depth appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the fact that he returned his soul to us. But this is again the right way, the way it should be done. It's as we are using the expression minafshei kokora, just like the person who, when he came to Moedim, his body automatically bowed. The same when a Yid wakes up in the morning and opens his eyes, it has to be min nafshei. Automatically comes the expression of thanks, of thankfulness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the expression where it bursts out automatically, the Moida ani lefanecha. And listening, the Rebbe came back again to the Sedra and went into in detail of the Rashi here. In Bechukosai Rashi says, quotes the pasuk. Rashi says, Yochel, I would want to think ze kiyum ha-mitzvahs, that it is the fulfillment of mitzvahs, because mitzvahs are referred to as chukim. Kishuoima ves mitzvosai tishmeru. However, when the pasuk continues and says ves mitzvosai tishmeru, harei kiyum ha-mitzvahs amu. Because the Indian of Shmira means observing. Observing is something which applies to mitzvahs. What do we observe? Mitzvahs. So what do I learn is the meaning of Im Bechukosai Telechu. Therefore I have no alternative but to learn that it means Shetiyu Amelim B'Torah, that we should toil, we should hover in learning. Rabbi is asking, why is Rashi getting the... Rashi's inyan is to tell us pshat in a pasuk. So Rashi should have said, very first pasuk at the beginning of the Sedra, Rashi should have said, what is the meaning of Im Bechukosai Telechu? That Im Bechukosai Telechu means learning of Torah, and mitzvosai tishmeru means the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Since when does Rashi get involved in telling us the yochel? I would want to learn this way. But this is not the way to learn. Rashi is here to tell us how to learn. Rashi does not get involved in telling us how not to learn. I would want to think that this is the pshat, but you should know this is not the pshat. So the Rebbe is learning. Why does Rashi say it? Because even after Rashi has told us what the meaning of Bechukosai Telechu, I would want to think it means the fulfillment of mitzvahs. So we are told, no, it means the learning of Torah. But the question is, what is learning Torah? Learning Torah is also a mitzvah. Talmud Torah is a mitzvah. So this Perush, which the Yochel Perush, let's call it, the Perush which I would think in Bechukosai Telechu means it refers to the fulfillment of mitzvahs. And Rashi is telling us, no, it does not refer to the fulfillment of mitzvahs, it refers to learning Torah. But again, Torah is also a mitzvah. So the Perush which I would have thought it meant is still being fulfilled to a degree. How is it fulfilled to a degree? Because the pasuk is talking about learning Torah. Limud HaTorah is also a mitzvah. Torah is one of the Taryag mitzvahs, is to learn Torah. And again, how can we fulfill mitzvahs? Only by learning Torah. But here the Rebbe goes, and from this the Rebbe goes deeper. What's the taich? Says the Rebbe, we say, V'salmu Torah keneget kulam. We say every morning. So here the Rebbe is teaching, V'salmu Torah keneget kulam means that Talmud Torah has within itself something which all mitzvahs don't, even the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. In other words, Torah has two aspects in itself. There is the Limud HaTorah as a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. However, there is something deeper in it. There is, besides Torah being equivalent to all mitzvahs, and through Limud HaTorah we are being Mekayim, one of the Taryag mitzvahs, there is something yet deeper in Torah. And that is the Taich for Salmud Torah Keneget Kulam. This special attachment which Torah offers, how a Yid becomes Farbrengen, how a Yid becomes tied with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is something very special in Torah, which Torah has it more than all other mitzvahs. And that is the Taich for Salmud Torah Keneget Kulam. The Rebbe went into details. We know that there's the learning of Torah of Zvulun and there's the learning of Torah of Yisachar. And Zvulun gets equal credit with Yisachar, to such an extent that whenever the concept of Zvulun and Yisachar is discussed, we always mention Zvulun before Yisachar. What does this show us? Zvulun is the one who's supporting Yisachar. Yisachar is the full-time learner. Zvulun is supporting him. And what type of arrangement does Zvulun have? He supports him and he has his share in Torah, which he has perhaps in the morning or perhaps in the evening, but he's not fully involved in Torah. Here we are talking about a deeper learning of Torah, a learning of Torah which, not the level of Zvulun. We're talking a learning of Torah which really brings out an association with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the Taich V'Salmud Torah Keneget Kulam. Not on the level how Torah is part of one of the mitzvahs. Torah is a part of one of the mitzvahs. But there is much a deeper inyan in Torah, and that is emphasized in the words of V'Salmud Torah Keneget Kulam. The Rebbe continued with the Farbrengen, as it's customary to refer to the Shir and Rambam, which is learned in the daily Shir of Rambam. And in today's Shir of Rambam, the Rambam discusses that korbanos were brought by day. Kola korbanos imakriven oison elo bayoim. Korbanos are brought during the day. And the Rambam proves this point from a pasuk, and then the Rambam continues that all the major avodas in the Beis Hamikdash had to be done during the day. And here the Rebbe really elaborated on this concept and brought out what is the inyan of a korban. The korban is the fact, korban stems from the word kiruv, closeness. A Yid becomes close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the idea of a korban. And naturally here we're talking in Ruchnius. And here the Rebbe brought in the famous interpretation of Chassidus on a pasuk in the beginning of Vayikra, where the pasuk uses the expression Odom ki yakriv mikem korban Lashem. A person ki yakriv mikem, a person who will bring a korban mikem, from amongst you, a korban to the Eibishter. So there's a very obvious question in this pasuk which the Alter Rebbe Likutei Torah discusses at length. And the question is, the proper grammar for this pasuk should have been Odam mikem ki yakriv korban Lashem. A person from amongst you people, from amongst Klal Yisrael, who will decide to bring a korban, then the halacha should be so so and so, as the pasuk goes on to say. But this is not how the pasuk expresses itself. Pasuk does not use this expression. What expression does the pasuk use? Pasuk uses an expression, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban. So what does Chassidus teach? Chassidus teaches that when a person wants to bring a korban, what's the idea of a korban? When he wants to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mikem, he has to bring a sacrifice, mikem, of himself. A person, in order to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is required to self-sacrifice, to sacrifice of our own habits, of our own enjoyments, of our own good times, of our own gashmistic things. And this is the real concept of a korban. The concept of a korban is ki yakriv mikem, part of us, part of you, the Rebbe says, addresses himself to each and every Yid. Part of you has to be brought as a korban. Or there's a going on the same line, on the same path. There's the Friedrich Rebbe's Mamorim. He uses the expression Odom ki yakriv mikem ubochem hadover tolui. You want to get close to the Eibishter, you want to become a korban. This is the concept of a korban. Closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In whose hands is it? Who is it up to? It is in your own hands. It is within our own power to become a korban to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is the expression of Adam ki yakriv. And here the Rebbe went into a lengthy explanation. What is the concept of day and what is the concept of night? If we're talking in spiritual interpretation of these two concepts, day means when es ist lichtig. When things are illuminated and a person sees everything around him, he sees his surroundings and has a clear picture of what's going on. And this is what the Rambam is telling us. When a person gets close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the inyan of korbanis, a korban is by yoim. And the Rebbe really elaborated what is the inyan of yoim, of day. The Rebbe said Yidden should not be lacking anything. It should be lichtig for Yidden. Yidden should have everything, whatever they need, to the fullest extent. And when Yidden have whatever they need to the fullest extent, that is the inyan that makes it much easier for them to get close and be makriv a korban. The Rebbe went into details. What is the highest madrega of a korban? The highest madrega in a korban is an oilo tmima. A korban oilo which went completely to the base, to the Eibishter. And nobody had any share in it. Amongst the Avos, who was an Oilo Tmima? Yitzchak. And the same thing we find the age of Yitzchak. Yitzchak lived longer than Avram. Yitzchak lived longer than Yaakov. And how many years did Yitzchak live? Yitzchak lived 180 years. 180 years is the symbolic, what does it express? It expresses the inyan of 10 times chai. In other words, 10 is always an union of shleimus, completeness. It's a complete cycle. A complete cycle of life. This is what Yitzchak had. And in Gashmias, it was reflected into 180 years. And this is the concept which the Rambam brings out, how the Rebbe is teaching it in Ruchnias. The Rebbe always says, the Rambam himself tells us that the whole union of mitzvahs is given l'sakin es hadeyos, to straighten out our views, our minds. In other words, the ruchnistic interpretation of these mitzvahs, that Yidden should be in a madrega of yoim. And that's why the Rambam says, Kol ha-korbanos ein makriven oisan ela bayoim. And brings proof from the pasuk. Then the Rambam goes on and tells us that there were certain things which were permitted to be brought at night. What is the inyan of night? The inyan of night is Golus. Golus, it's dark. And the Rambam tells us that even at a level of Golus, there's also how a Yid gets close to the Eibishter. And primarily the Rambam discusses the Nesachim. The Nesachim, that's the wines which were poured.
wines which were poured on the Mizbeach. The Rambam gets into details. There were certain wines which were permitted to be brought only by day. However, there were certain wines, certain pouring, which were permitted at night. The Rebbe raised the question, did not answer it. He raised the question, we have to understand, how does the Rambam tell us that pouring of the wine, the nesachim, as the Rambam refers to it, was permitted to be done at night? At a time there is a halacha that the gates of the Azorah, the gates of the Beis HaMikdash, were locked every evening. So if they were locked every evening, how was it possible to have access and go ahead and pour the wine? And the Rebbe says this is a question. The Rebbe has an expression many times. When he raises a question and does not answer it, he uses the expression "Tein lechacham v'yechkam oy." A wise person, the chacham, will search for an answer. So the Rebbe says, we should search for an answer, but at the same time, the Rebbe expressed himself with a smile, saying we should search for an answer, but make sure that we do not stay up too late tonight, so we will not be able to wake up tomorrow and go on with the proper Avodas Hashem of tomorrow. The Rebbe says tomorrow is Yom Rishon. In fact, Yom Rishon is always a reminder of the first day of creation, so it's a very special day when we have to start our day properly and accordingly. But again, the question is a question that remains. How is it possible to go ahead and pour the wine at night at a time we know that there's a halacha that this entire area, the gates to this entire area were closed at night? However, in this inyan, the Rebbe explained a machlokes of the Rambam and Rashi. And this is relates to a relative popular inyan, the very first Mishnah in Masechtas Brachas. And when the Rebbe mentions Masechta Bracha, right away he says, what's the inyan of the Bracha? It's the first Masechta in Shas, the opening of Shas. And what's the inyan of the Bracha? Inyan of our Bracha is Chassidus teaches a hamshocha, to bring down a revelation of godliness. That's the whole inyan of Bracha. So here the Mishnah discusses that there are things which we are really permitted to do all night. However, excuse me, the Chachamim have said that we can only do it till Chatzos, kidei laharchik es ha'odam min ha'aveira, to make sure that we should do it accordingly, we should do it properly, and if we would be allowed to do it until the morning, then we may miss the time. One of the very famous one is the inyan of night Krishma. Krishma, which we're obligated to say every night. The question is, until what time can we learn Krishma? So the Mishnah here says, really, we would be allowed to read until the morning. But the Chachamim have set a set time at Chatzos, because laharchik es ha'odam min ha'aveira, to keep a person at a distance from an aveira. If we look into Rashi, Rashi refers to whatever is discussed in the Mishnah. The Mishnah here discusses hektar chalovim ve'ivorim. Hektar chalovim ve'ivorim means this is like a final cleanup job which was done in the Beis HaMikdash after all the korbanos were brought. So we just discussed korbanos, it was permissible to bring only during the day. However, hektar chalovim ve'ivorim, all the fat and all the ivorim, all the parts of the body which were left around the Mizbeach, this was permitted to do all night. This is what the Mishnah says. But the only thing the Chachamim told us, at Chatzos, and the reason for the lahachik es ha'odam min ha'aveira. Well, this is all mentioned in the first Mishnah, Masechta Brachos. If we were to look into Rashi, in the very first Mishnah, Rashi will tell you that the hektar chalovim, the Mishnah discusses the burning of the fats which was left from the korbanos. This is something which you could really do all night, and there is no limitation. There is no limitation on this until Chatzos, with the interpretation that why did the Chachamim limit it until Chatzos? To keep a person at a distance from an Aveira. This is something which really could be done all night. And there's no limitation on the Indian of Hekta of Chalovim until Chatzos. This is what Rashi tells us here in the Mishnah. What's Rashi's reasoning for it? Here comes in another halacha. There's a concept in the Beis HaMikdash, Koyanim Zrizim. Rashi doesn't say it, but this is how the Rebbe is learning Pshat from Rashi. That Koyanim would do things fast. The Kohen wouldn't schlep around on the Aved in the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, being that they would do things fast, so Rashi says, we're not worried about the fact. Why did we say that things that are permitted to do all night, we only let people do it until midnight? Why? Because he may get involved and he may not do it until it becomes daylight. So we'll lose out the mitzvah. But by something which Koyanim have to do in the Beis HaMikdash, this concept does not apply. Because Koyanim azrizim, Koyanim do things fast. The male of Koyanim do things fast, we can rely on them that it will be done properly. They'll finish in the proper time, they'll finish in due time, and it will not come to an Aveir. This is Rashi's shit. The Rebbe says it seems that the Rambam does not learn that way. And if we look into the halachas, there's a halacha here that saw it this afternoon, that the leftover, yes. What does the Rambam say? Afal pisha muta lahaktir imurim veivorim balayla. Even though we are allowed to do this work of cleaning up and burning all the fats and the parts of the behemoth at night, we don't go ahead intentionally and postpone this. We try to do it even during the day. It shouldn't even have to be done at the first part of the night either. And the Rambam goes on, Chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. A mitzvah is dear when it is done in time. This process of burning these parts of the korban, even though it is permitted to do at night, in the Beis HaMikdash, we were allowed to take care of the korbanos on Shabbos, right? Even though they lit fires and the things which we are not allowed to do outside of the Beis HaMikdash. In Beis HaMikdash, we were allowed to do it. Now the question arises, this type of work, the burning of the emur and the inner parts of the behemoth, which was left out aside from the korban, and it had to be burnt in the Beis HaMikdash. Are we permitted to do it on Shabbos? Or perhaps let us better wait till Motzei Shabbos. So the halacha is we are allowed to do it on Shabbos. From the mere fact that we are allowed to do it on Shabbos, even though it's involving in Yonim, which normally we are not allowed to do on Shabbos. In our own homes, we're not allowed to do this type of work on Shabbos. Only in the Beis HaMikdash we're allowed to do it. What does this show us? This shows us that really, when is the time to do this avodah? By day. The only thing the Chachamim gave us allowed, if it was for whatever reason it was impossible to do it by day, one can go ahead and do it at night. What do we see from this? That the Rambam learns that when we say it is permitted to be done at night, hekta chalavim veivarim, it is not all night, like Rashi learns. Even at night, it is only until Chatzos. But after Chatzos, it cannot be done, like the Mishnah tells us, on all other things which the Chachamim have said could be done all night. But the Chachamim at the same time, Torah said it could be done all night. But the Chachamim set a limitation. It could only be done until Chatzos. So the shit of the Rambam is that hekta chalavim veivarim taka cannot be done after Chatzos, just like all other things which are discussed in the Mishnah, that it is advisable not to do it after Chatzos. And the Rambam does not learn like Rashi, that considers this one exception in the entire Mishnah of all the things which the Mishnah is discussing. here talking on the Indian of Yoim and Laila. That Yoim is Geula and Laila is Golus, as we just discussed. Here the Rebbe brought out a very unusual taich. There's a Gemara. Gemara says, Kolu kol hakitzin. All the kates. Kate is a set time. We had Jewish, Gdolei Yisrael have given us many set times for Geula, for Mashiach to come. However, Kolu kol hakitzin. All these set times have passed. This is how the Gemara says. Ve'ein hadavar talui ela b'tshuva. And now it is only dependent on tshuva. Simple, how do we learn Pshat in the Gemara? That the meaning is Yidden have to do tshuva, and if Yidden will do tshuva, the Rebbe will send Mashiach Tzidkenu and take us out of Golus. And here the Rebbe came out with an original taich. Klakolu kol hakitzin. All the set times for Mashiach to come have already passed. And there is one alternative left. Ein hadavar talui ela b'tshuva. What does tshuva means? Tshuva means to return. It is only now in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Rebishter should do tshuva. What do we mean by the Rebishter doing tshuva? The Rebishter should return B'nai Yisrael to him. The Rebishter should bring each and every Yid back to him. And when the Rebishter will bring each and every Yid back to him, tshuva that the Rebishter has to do. And when the Rebishter will bring every Yid back to him, then Mashiach Tzidkenu will come. The Rebbe added on, we know the Rebbe keeps on stressing that this is a year of Shnas Tashmeit. Tovshin Memtes is Tashmeit. And Tashmeit means, this is a concept which is used regarding Shemitah. Shemitah, it's the same word. What does it we mean by Shemitah? If we owe somebody money and it comes Shemitah, Tashmeit Yodecha, all the debts have to be dissolved. They are no longer in existence. The Rebbe has been stressing how this is the year where we have to demand from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that all the debts that Bnei Yisrael have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are definitely indebted to him, but the Rebishter from his side should dissolve all these debts, should not claim none of them. And as the Rebbe stressed today very strongly, it's a year of Tashmeit Yodecha. Tashmeit means to destroy, totally to dissolve all evil, all bad. And we should get ready for Geula. And the Rebbe said, it's been extremely interesting. The Rebbe says, should Mashiach Chas v'Sholem be delayed? Should he Chas v'Sholem be delayed? The Rebbe says it was brought to his attention that Tovshin Nun, next year, the year which we're approaching, that it's brought in Svarim that Tovshin Nun is a suitable year for Geula. So Chas v'Sholem, should it be delayed in this year, Mashiach will not come this year, but at least let this year's Olzain Tashmeit, so we will be ready for Tovshin Nun for the Indian of Geula. The Rebbe, at the very end of the Farbrengen, spoke very strongly, getting back to what he spoke about last week, on the importance of Avas Yisrael. And what do we find by the disciples of Rabbi Akiva? The Gemara tells us, Lo nohagu kavod zeh b'zeh. They did not respect one another. So Rabbi spoke last week at length, spoke about it today again. The lesson which we have to derive from this, how can we rectify what they did wrong? And by us rectifying it, we will be the true disciples of Rabbi Akiva. Because Rabbi Akiva is the one that says, that if something, the foundation in Torah is Avas Yisrael. So when we will have proper Avas Yisrael, we will be the true disciples of Rabbi Akiva. And what does the Gemara use the expression? The Gemara uses the expression, Shaloi nohagu kavod zeh b'zeh. Asks the Rebbe, proper expression when we're talking about kavod, when we're talking about honor, respect, should have been Shaloi nosnu kavod zeh lazeh. They didn't give kavod one to another. Shaloi cholku kavod zeh lazeh. They did not share kavod one to another. Nonetheless, the Gemara uses the expression Shaloi nohagu kavod zeh b'zeh. And what is the stress in nohagu? Nohagu, says the Rebbe, reminds us on two things. Nohagu comes from the word minhag. Minhag means a custom. What's the pshat of custom? Something which we are really used to is a custom, is a minig. And this is what Chazal are stressing. Nahagu koved ze b'ze. What's relevant to us is how we have to express love to our fellow colleagues, to our fellow friends, to every Yid. It has to be a minhag. It has to become a custom. It has to become part of our lives, part of our daily lives, the inyan of Avas Yisrael. And here comes another taich. Nahagu is Meloshen manhig, Meloshen leader. Leadership. A leader is called a manhig. So the Rebbe taught this afternoon, the concept of Avas Yisrael has to take leadership. In other words, what's a pshat leadership? Leadership means something which is top priority. Amongst people, the leader is priority. Within a person, the concept that takes leadership means it's top priority in the person. The inyan of Avas Yisrael, we have to build it up within each and every one of us to such an extent that Avas Yisrael, the kovod zeh b'zeh, the respect which we give to others, the Rebbe threw in words, saying words, we have to take from our own kovod and give to other people. And all this has to be done in a way that we should know that the inyan of Avas Yisrael is the manhigus, that's the leadership, that's something which is prime and priority. And this is how we prepare, and this is how we are the true disciples of Rabbi Akiva, and this naturally is the proper preparation for Kabbalah Satira. And here the Rebbe also stressed very strongly the importance of saying Pirkei Avos during these weeks. Rebbe says there are some that think that Pirkei Avos is something minor, and they really don't realize the importance of it. Pirkei Avos tells us the Rebbe is really 5 prokim. What we will be saying next week, the 6th week, that's not part of Pirkei Avos. That's a bereise, which is really called Kinyan Torah, which means how to acquire Torah. It's a bereise which really discusses at length all the various ways how to acquire Torah, how to become close to Torah. So Mamela, that's why the Chachamim have arranged that once we have finished saying Pirkei Avos, which the contents of Pirkei Avos is again a contents. What's the contents of Pirkei Avos? Also what brings a person close to Torah, it creates a love for Torah by Yidden. And after we have finished these 5 prokim of Pirkei Avos, that is when we come to the 6th perek, which tells us how to acquire Torah. Interesting, at the end of the Farbrengen, at the very end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe began to sing Chassidish Nigun of Hinei ma toivu ma noim. How nice and wonderful is it when Sheves Achim Gam Yochad, that when people are sitting together, which is again another stress. And the Rebbe singing this nigun, Rebbe sang out the first part of the nigun himself, and then everybody joined in, which is again stressing on the importance of how ma'toivu ma'noyim, how nice and how pleasant is it when Sheves Achim Gam Yochad, when people are together. Before we finish, I'll allow myself, regarding this whole lineage which we spoke earlier about Bechukosai, Meloshen Chakika, Meloshen engraving, comes to my mind. I heard there's a vote which is related, which fits in here very geschmack, as a very, relates here very nicely. There was a chassid here in the United States, here in America. His name was Reb Shmuel Levitin. Shmuel was a unique Hasidic personality. He was a Talmud of Lubavitch in the days of the Rebbe Rashab, and later very close to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and arrived here in the United States on or about the same time as the previous Rebbe in 1940. He was the first mashpia here in the yeshiva in Torah Minim here in America. In fact, he was selected by the Rebbe Rashab to be his first shliach at that time. Must have been in the 1910s, when he was sent by the Rebbe Rashab to serve as a Rav, as a Chacham for the Georgian Jews, for the Gruzina Yidden. And it's interesting that amongst Gruzina Yidden, Georgian Jews until today, elderly Georgian Jews speak about the name Reb Shmuel Levitin with tremendous amount of respect. He was a very Naturally, I don't know if they still knew him. They may have heard the name from their fathers, their families. He was a very learned and Hasidische, Geschmacke, clever Jew. That's to put it as brief as possible. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived here in the United States, he sent him to visit a city. In that city there were many Hasidische descendants of Hasidische families who themselves were not have become affected. We're going back to 1940, and they were people that arrived here much earlier. They themselves have been affected by the environment in the United States in those days, but somehow they consider themselves as what we would call Nusachari, and they would have Nusachari, and they would, at the best of their ability, live up to whatever they still were able to hold out. And Reb Shmuel came to visit this community, and he visited many people who he knew were descendants of Hasidische families. And at his visit to one of these families, the head of the household tells him, "Tell me, we really appreciate your visit very much. You have came all the way from New York, and in those days traveling from New York to the Midwest meant a night on a train. It wasn't like today. But really tell us, what is the nature of your visit?" So Reb Shmuel says, "You know what I will tell you? I'll answer you." He says, "By Yidden we know we have a scribe. We have a sefer. So bigger cities would support their seferim. Not only one sefer, a big city has enough to support 2 seferim or 3 seferim or more. What did a small shtetl do?" So in a small shtetl, he says, years ago there was a concept of a traveling sefer. And this traveling sefer would know that Cheshmi visited this shtetl and Kislev the next shtetl, and the people in the shtetl also knew the same. That this is the month they could expect the sefers, and he would prepare the sefer Torahs that filled the mezuzahs and so forth. Tells him Reb Shmuel, Yidden are compared to a sefer Torah. Yidden compose a sefer Torah. Yisrael abbreviates Yesh Shishim Rebu Yesi Yisla Torah. So just like there's a Gashmiistic sefer, there's a Ruchniistic sefer. There's a sefer that takes care of the Gashmiistic sefer Torahs, and there's need for a sefer to come and take care of the Ruchniistic sefer Torah. So he says, you know, I came, visit families, we just talk a little bit about our past, about your fathers and Zaydis, and where you really all originated from. So he considered himself being a Ruchni Izdike Sefer. When Reb Shmuel came back here to New York, and he came into the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he reported to the Frierdiker Rebbe on his trip, he also told the Rebbe this incident that he had, and he told him how he answered this particular individual who asked him the question, what is the nature of his visit? So Frierdiker Rebbe listens to him, and he says, what you told him is right. However, there is one major difference between a Gashmiistic Sefer Torah and a spiritual Sefer Torah, which is a Yid. Every Yid. A Gashmiistic Sefer Torah is written ink on the parchment, and therefore, being that it's written with ink on parchment, it can come a time when the ink fades, and therefore the Sefer Torah can become a puzzle of Sefer Torah. However, Yidden, he continued, it is not like Oisiyis Haksiva, it is not like handwritten letters, it is like engraved letters, Oisiyis Hachkika. And engraved letters, continues the Rebbe to him, can never vanish, can never disappear. And therefore, a Yid is such a Sefer Torah that can never become puzzle. The only thing on engraved letters, sometimes it could accumulate dust. And when it accumulates dust, what has to be done is you take a brush and carefully brush out the dust. However, a Yid could never become puzzle. Hinei matay v'manayim sheves achim gam yachad. Hinei matay v'manayim sheves achim gam yachad.
Shabbos achim gam yachad Hinei matov umanayim Shabbos achim gam yachad
Good.